right. Hey, everybody. It's nice to see everybody again today. My name is Sharon Chaden Glass. And if we've never met before, I'm really happy to meet you here in this venue, even though it's just virtual. Sometimes it's the best that we can do, right? Today, I have two new speakers. I have Chanel Wright and I have Elizabeth Kachur, but you may call her Liz here. She told me that is okay to be more informal here. All right, you're all ready.
Awesome. Well, first, good evening, everyone. I really want to thank Sharon for inviting me. This is really a cool opportunity to just be connected to a new group of professionals, and she shared how large this group is and kind of the vast areas that you all are joining us from. So just really appreciate the opportunity, and I'll share a little bit about my background just personally, and then kind of like she said, how I got to the things, but really looking forward to the conversation. I don't love the one-way kind of nature of virtual, but it is what we have these days. So as Sharon said, I'm Chanel Wright. I currently serve as a manager for learning and development for a company based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. It's actually an addiction medicine health company, and it's been off the ground about 8 years. So newish in the startup world in the sense of, not a long-standing company, but rapidly growing. But before that, I would say truly I'm an educator at heart. So I will say that started when I, of course, was in high school deciding what I wanted to do. I went to undergrad as for education to become a teacher and special education specifically. But even before that, I was the Y kid. I grew up in a beauty shop with a single mom. And so, the beauty shop became my babysitter, and then all the guests became my teachers. So I remember very early on asking why and wanting to know just how things were and understand people and understand all of the things that I was observing. So ever since then, I've just really had a passion for learning and educating and most importantly, just developing people. And so it's led me down a variety of different places. I started my career formally in higher education and spent several years as an administrator in various roles, but all of them had a theme of educating in some way, and whether that was formally through programs and trainings or passively through building relationships. But I would say there is the first space where I started to understand instructional design and was exposed to it. And then as I transitioned out of that space about 3 years ago now in 2019, I really started to understand, and it was also right pre-COVID, the nature that this virtual world and how much instructional design is a necessity. And so recently I signed up to take a certification in instructional design to get a deeper understanding for myself personally. So when Sharon asked me to join, it was really just exciting to say like, oh, this is something I've had an interest in anyways, and had an opportunity to work with Sharon in the past and just know kind of the innovation and motivation she brings to the spaces. So was really looking forward to being here. But just happy to share today in our breakout sessions more of how I've connected the two worlds of instructional design within my space of learning and development, and just answer any questions and hear other experiences from you all. So thanks again for having me, and Sharon, really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Chanel. That was great. I'm glad you went first. My nerves for doing this went down a few notches. I am currently a contract employee working with a temp agency that found me my first ID job. I work for a company that does home care for people that aren't going into a nursing home, want to have the care at home. There's a variety of different needs, and my role currently is creating the onboarding training and any other kind of instructional needs or support resources for the people that work for the company. So the caregivers, the people that staff the different clients. I did some work even for DocuSign, right? So people were struggling to get some information, and little help desk guy was super busy with questions, and I found a way to create some documents that were, I'm thinking they're useful. We haven't had them out too long, but it was exciting. It was one of my first real projects. How did I come into instructional design? Started out in accounting many years ago, and soon found that my need, similar to Chanel, to be around people and work with people kind of overshadowed my love of numbers. And I started looking at other opportunities very early on and went into teaching and did general education as well as special education teaching for quite a few years. Had a break with my children at home, stayed home with them. I was grateful to be able to do that, and went right back into teaching because that's where my passion was. Spent about 11 years in my last role working special ed and then gen ed. And I kept trying to find the area in education that kept me excited and passionate and not exhausted. And I kept thinking, well, if I change grade levels, that'll be it. No, I'm going to go from special ed to gen ed. And I've worked with kindergarten, first, second. I worked at a middle school level with special ed, and nothing ever really kept me excited for long enough to get over the hump of the difficulty of finding that balance with teaching. So obviously, as most people, when COVID hit, I was home, I was teaching from home, and it was almost like that was the last straw for me for just the overwhelming lack of balance in my life. And I loved my office prior to that, and I didn't want to go in that room unless I was teaching because it was such long days and it was so difficult. And I had already started to look that first summer, 2020, into what I might want to do. And as a teacher, you get professional development, and people came in and trained us. And I had this one trainer that just really did a rock star job. And I thought, I could do that. Yeah, I want to be a trainer. So, I'm going to go head first in, and really did a lot of research on trainers and what I could do. And nothing felt right. And I could talk more, obviously, like Chanel said, in the smaller rooms about my real, approach to it. But I found people along the way, and I worked with a coach, and she really helped me unpack the nugget of what I wanted to do, and then brought up the word instructional design, which I had never heard of. I kept saying I want to do training or ed tech, or these are all the things I love. And she said, I'm hearing all this, but have you ever heard of instructional design? It was like, what is that? And it was almost like, once you hear of something, you see it everywhere. And I started to notice, went into CVS and I had to get something, and I went on this little thing. I'm like, I bet an instructional designer created that little walkthrough. And, you just start to see it in all the aspects. And I thought, I really want to do this. And I loved the variety. So that's really what kind of made me stick with this, and, bootstrapping it and finding people that could teach me little bits, and learning on my own through LinkedIn Learning. That's really how I kind of I had done training of teachers for years at my school, but I never realized how that teaching of adults could transpose into another career. So that really was like the big aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
I didn't know how much I should say here and how much I should say in the breakout room. So I think that's a good summary of me.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying about not knowing that it was a field, not knowing that instructional design was a field. It's not when you're in college and you got, well, now it's all online, but when I started college, they give you the book and they have all the majors, but now you can scroll through and be like it was education. That was it. And if you were really special, there was like foreign language education and maybe TESOL, which is what I became, but there was no instructional design. And at least maybe it was because I went to college in the early 2000s. So it's a while from now, but maybe more people have the degree. Maybe it's becoming more. Does anybody know, is it becoming more of a thing, or is it still kind of hidden? What do you think?
My guess is it's hidden. I've had a lot of people, both young teachers I worked with who are, 3 years out of college and, 10 years out of college. They had no idea what I was getting into.
No, and also like when you look at the job postings, people are almost kind of hesitant to even say a degree in instructional design because they know so few people have it. So they'll say, we want someone with education or related experience or whatever. But I really wish that more people knew about it who were interested in learning education, like put it in that umbrella. Like when people go to school and are like, I'm going to be a teacher. And I'm like, cool. Do you know all of the things that you could do that don't necessarily involve classroom teaching? Because it's nice to know, like, if the classroom becomes a place that you're looking to get out of, that you have other options. Brittany says, I found out about it from a friend who transitioned from academia that got halfway through a PhD program and decided to change professions. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, Brittany?
Sure, yeah. So it's good to see you, Sharon.
Hey,
first of all.
nice to see you
I haven't seen you in forever. Yeah, so I'm actually working on my PhD in health communication at Texas A&M University while teaching at the University of Dayton. Family situation kind of brought me back to Dayton while I was working on my dissertation. But I had a friend who I was going through the program with, and he suddenly said, you know what, I just don't feel like academia is for me, but I'm halfway through a PhD, so I'm going to take some other classes and get some certifications and see what I can actually do with what I've already learned and what I have, because he realized teaching wasn't what he wanted to do, at least in academia. He didn't want to have to do the research. He was studying rhetoric at the time. And I talked to him later, and he said he was working at a law firm. And I'm like, what are you doing at a law firm? How does that work? And he worked at the law firm for a bit, and then he decided to switch from that because that wasn't really wanted to be. And he recently contacted me and said, oh, I got a job for Meta doing instructional design. And I'm like, okay, wait, what is this? I have no clue what it is. So he started telling me more about it. And as Liz said, it's been popping up everywhere. I have a friend that works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base here in Dayton, and she's like, oh yeah, I do that. She said, you'd probably be really good at it given your background. And I'm like, okay, I gotta see what this is about, because everybody keeps talking about it. So that was my experience.
Too good. You'd be really good at it.
Yeah.
Like what are we talking about again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it I'm sorry, I have a crying child. He'll come in here in a minute, but oh boy. It never fails. Never fails. There is always, I feel like it happens every other networking session. It's always the younger one too. Can you hear it? You can't. Now he's laughing.
Just barely. Oh, I hear the giggles.
Okay. Anyway. All right. I'll say just a little bit about me, because I'll probably, since we are just 3 people, we usually have 4, but my third person had to reschedule. I'm in higher education right now. I went to school to be a TESOL instructor. I'm sorry, an ESL instructor. So within the TESOL profession. And I did that for 13 years. And I had to change because I just didn't have the time anymore to do the job the way that I was told constantly. This is industry standard. I'm like, well, industry standard is not cutting it anymore with 2 kids at home that are small. So I couldn't change the system. So I decided I had to do something different. And so that's kind of how I kind of struck out into Glassdoor and started looking at other jobs and found out about instructional design and thought, like, that sounds a lot easier than what I'm doing right now. And that's not to say that, you know, sitting here right now, I'm like, oh, my job is so much easier. It's just different, right? It's a different skill set and different type of work. But I definitely think what's easier is I can go home and leave my job where it is. I don't have to work evenings and weekends. And when I get to the summer, I don't need summer just to recover from burnout. Oh, I wanted to tell you, I was at TESOL 2022 in Pittsburgh. First time we've been back in person since 2019. And it was such a cool experience because I actually had like people that I didn't recognize saying, it's you. And I'm like, I don't know, who are you? You know, and they'd been to these sessions before. And I was just like so touched because they would say their names. I'm like, oh, you're that little square. You're a person, you have height and stuff. And so it was really gratifying to meet people in person, you know, after a couple years of just doing this stuff online. All right, so now we're at whole group Q&A. So if you have a question that you want to ask the whole group, feel free to unmute yourself and I'll find you and spotlight you. Here for you, or you can put it in the chat if you don't like talking.
I have another question. I'm sorry. I didn't get to ask the ladies about the authoring tools that they're using and how much experience they had to bring to the table or needed using those, because that's something that I know with our portfolios where, you know, and developing one to get a job, we do have to have some knowledge, but how much and,
How much?
and what programs. I know that's asked a lot in a lot of the other meetings, but it's always good to know.
Mm-hmm. Liz or Chanel, do you want to, either of you want to chat about that?
Yeah, I can briefly share. And I did just see Sharon Liz mentioned she's going to jump off and come back. So we'll catch her up hopefully when she's back in. Honestly, that was one of the reasons that I joined the certificate for instructional design, is because I wanted to get a good sense of what was out there and then also beyond what I had known. So I would say my experience is pretty limited to just 3, and I'm looking forward to exploring more. So I'll definitely, now that I know this group exists, I'm going to continue to be in touch and, you know, want to listen to other speakers and sessions. But currently we use Camtasia and Snagit, which were used platforms that I had exposed to through higher education. I think that they are a nice compilation of those. I use Prezi as well, because now they have that intuitive feature where you can add the video over the kind of clip throughs. And I had previously used Prezi kind of when it first launched. I was in my master's program at the time and had really liked that platform as opposed to PowerPoint. And then more recently, so the company that I work with, we're a Teams, Microsoft Office, and Teams has quite a few add-on apps that you can use that you can really use as interactive tools or things for how to make those interactive. And of course, experience with Zoom, and then there's also a feature in Slack. You haven't explored Slack. There's a recording feature outside of the meeting kind of group that you might use. It's a small one. It's not as you can't do it as a live session, but it is a recordable thing that you can use. So those are just the basic ones that I've worked with, but I'm sure there's so many more, and I'm looking at, you know, to learn more of authoring tools as well.
Liz, did you want to talk about any authoring tools that you've used?
Sure. Before just the most recent project we started using, I was able to convince them to do the Articulate subscription. So we've got that for the team, which kind of makes it easy when we go through the review process for a project. When I first got into the company, they were without almost anything. And thankfully, my first few projects were not e-learning kind of courses. They were, I did InDesign, which I'm going to be, I pretty much learned on the weekend. I mean, I'm comfortable with Adobe, but I was just like, all right, I'm just going to walk through all of these tutorials, and Adobe has phenomenal tutorials. So if you're familiar with one Adobe tool, you're pretty much familiar with most of them. They all work around the same way, but wow, InDesign is just amazing. So, and I had already done Adobe Xd. That was good for like mock-ups and creating just a quick walkthrough of what something might look like. And it's a little bit less intense. I think that's pretty much what I've used so far. Obviously, they're pretty much PowerPoint people. So yeah, we're trying to get them away from the PowerPoint presentation. I think that was one of my interview questions. My boss was looking to try to step away from death by PowerPoint, I think is what she said, because it's tedious.
And Kimberly specifically asked about how much did you need? And I hear from Chanel saying I learned some, but not a ton. And Liz, would you say that you had to learn a ton before you got started?
I'm definitely a tech head by nature, right? I was always the person in my district that was learning at Prezi. I remember doing that. That was one of my first things. I loved the way that it presented content. So I was very comfortable with computers, technology. I was a tech trainer in my district for about 5 years before I went into this, which is why it felt like such a good fit. But even then, Storyline was a bit of a, it was PowerPoint on steroids is what it felt like. And it was very cool because all the little triggers and hotspot and all those things, I love that kind of functionality anyway. So it wasn't, yes, I learned quite a bit over the last few months and while I was applying, but it wasn't like, oh God, I have to learn this. I loved it. I have 2 monitors. I'd put a TV show over here and I would just play with it. And I'm not an expert by any means. And I don't believe you need to be an expert going into something. You need to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take you 20 hours to create something small. You want to get past that initial learning hump, but you don't have to be a whiz at anything.
I'll add on to with my experience. Sharmila, I see your hand. I'll get you in just a second. My experience, I liked tinkering with like Storyline to learn what it was, and with Camtasia, try out the free license. What is it like? Just so I kind of know. But I don't. The job that I got wasn't depending on me to know all of that stuff from day one. Instead, the job that I got was like, oh, well, you kind of know kind of the basket of skills and you want to learn. So cool. Now we have somebody in this position that will learn this thing. And as long as we're a healthy work environment, she won't leave. And yeah. And I think that honestly, just look for a place where you feel like there's that same appreciation for yourself, the value you're bringing in, that people like you being there, right? And then, they'll pay for you to learn, and you do need to have the skill set, but learning the tech is kind of like, you can do that, right? Right, Kim? Kim's got it. Sharmila, I see your hand. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question for Elizabeth. So she mentioned about like the Adobe InDesign. So do we have to also subscribe to learn that, or like you can get like free trainings for that? Because like last time because I'm learning like Articulate and I have learned quite a bit, but like I had to subscribe for Articulate, right? Like and it was expensive.
It's a very short free trial too. And Adobe also is subscription based by month. So that's why I'm saying
if you're a teacher now, you can get a little bit of a discount.
Yeah,
that way.
That's why I'm saying don't kill yourself to know everything before you get the job. Natalie, you have a question?
Well, I wanted to give a piece of advice to Sharma. I just found out that for getting free training on those things, you can do LinkedIn Learning. I know that you have to normally pay for the premium for it, but actually, if you're in an area where your local library has it, you can, and I've already called my local library for it, and they have it with them. So I just have to use a digital access card with them. Just call your library and ask them. So that'll save you like $50 a month, and you can get free training from LinkedIn Learning, which is, I feel like they're very valid, like beginner trainings for you and stuff.
I completely agree. And if you're in the Dayton area, like I am, you can get it with your library card number.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Sharon. Although, like, I'm not in US, like I'm in Toronto, Canada, but of course, like I can definitely check up with my local libraries. Like Toronto does have like Toronto Public Libraries, right? So I can definitely check out with them. Thanks for that advice. Yeah.
We have just a couple minutes left. Last questions.
Yes, one question I always like to ask people is, a lot of people will tell you about your portfolio and making sure your resume is transferred, but what was another piece of advice you got or you wish you would have gotten to successfully transition into your new role?
Chanel or Liz, you want to go first? Liz is laughing. Oh no, is your audio out again?
No, I'm gonna let Chanel go first. I have to think for a minute.
Okay. And I was gonna say, I'll let Liz go because I've been going first the whole time. So, but happy to. That was a great question, first off. And I definitely, it is such a balance. We talked about this in the breakout just quickly, but it's such a balance in finding the way to wordsmith your experience that like those resumes, they put you so much, but I will say never underestimate the value of just reaching out and trying to personalize things through that process, whether it's to anyone you can find on the company's LinkedIn or even just the recruiter, perhaps if you kind of express your interest. Now at my company, I work very closely with the talent acquisition team, and I just can't say how far that goes to just say, I'm just really interested to learn more about this opportunity and, just demonstrate how excited you are. And if there's a key piece in the job description that you would say, like, is there anyone that I could talk to just get a better understanding? Most companies, I think, will be, open to you networking in that way because they're going to want somebody who's truly interested in engaging in those pieces. So I just think don't undervalue that piece, and just networking in general is and it's hard because especially in this virtual world, like, you get hundreds of kind of things that can pop up and determining which one's the most important, but it is really valuable. So
I think the one thing that I would say, and I love what you just added, so I won't go and repeat that because that's definitely super important in networking. And I think someone said it in our breakout room is to not give up. I had on my bulletin board, I had made a little index card. Every time I would apply to a job, I'd put like, what was the job? Who did I send it to and the date? And there was a lot of index cards up there. And I didn't get a ton of interviews, but I got enough. And I got the one that I needed, obviously, to get the job. But I just didn't want to give up, right? I think it's hard. And, my one son is looking for a job, and just keep changing something, change a little bit, right? Something's not working, tweak this, tweak that, but don't give up because you definitely have what you need. And you just got to find that little nugget that's going to make the difference in a job.
And I will end with mine. I would definitely say don't undervalue the previous experience that you're bringing into this new job. You're not behind everyone else. They hired you. Once you get that job, they hired you because they like the background you're bringing in, and it's going to enrich your new work environment. And if they choose you, they appreciate what you're bringing in. And so I would definitely say that was something I wish I would have known earlier on, that people weren't going to be like, oh, she hasn't done this very often or for very long. No, they were like, oh, so cool, you taught international students. And I was like, yeah, it is pretty cool, isn't it? It was just really refreshing to hear that from other people. All right, we are out of time. I am going to give our guest speakers lots of thanks for being here today. Thank you very much. I always appreciate when people share their time, and I want to be respectful of your time and end on time. And I hope that we will see a lot of you back here in May. And do feel free to leave feedback on that feedback form, and I'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Good night, guys.
Have a great one. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.